Hi everybody. So I've said I will make a video each night, and I have had a previous night of difficult time sleeping. I am, yeah, I had a tough time sleeping. I don't know exactly what it was. Couldn't be the caffeine. I didn't have as much coffee as I usually do, and even then I sleep. By the way, yeah, I do drink coffee sometimes during the late evenings because I've realized that it doesn't really impact my sleep as much. And also, when I don't have coffee, I actually sleep worse. So I'm trying to, I don't know what it is, it might be addictive, the fact that I'm a bit of a coffee or caffeine addict or whatever. But I just noticed throughout my life it was massively difficult to quit caffeine, not least the reason maybe that I've always consumed caffeine throughout my life. And so as my caffeine count goes, yeah, I do usually have a couple of coffee during the day, and I normally have a difficult time actually quitting it. And it didn't really impact my sleep as much, neither nor did it actually impact my anxiety. So I've noticed, I don't know exactly what it is. Like some nights I do sleep better, but last night was a bit tough. I had a very tough time. I actually probably fell asleep at 3 a.m. I woke up at 8, and I slept in patches. So usually when I wake up, I sleep in patches, and it's like I always wake up unrefreshing and I have to go back to sleep, and it's extremely intoxicating. Look, it could be the caffeine, but it's normally how my sleep goes. I would wake up and I can't go back to sleep. And I mean, by 5 a.m., 6 a.m., the caffeine should have worked out. I mean, I had a coffee the last, about, so that's about, I mean, that's about 12 hours. I mean, it gives you 12 hours, from 5 to 5, I mean, you do get 12 hours there. So, I mean, it's not as if I didn't wait the time, and I slept worse after 5 a.m. than I did before. So it couldn't really be the caffeine, can it? I mean, yeah, it could potentially be, but I never had a problem with caffeine that much. So I physically have this problem where I can't go back to sleep when I wake up and I feel unrefreshed. And it's extremely difficult for me to labor on and try and sleep. And it's like I physically can't. It's now been 2, 3 weeks. I physically can't get a full night's of rest. It's just when I wake up, I tell exactly what I experience when there's kind of there's clear cut signals that I actually look for when I know I didn't really have a good night. Physically, my brain feels foggy. I can't speak fast. I can't speak at all. I can't articulate myself. I take hours to even think about a word. Like it's not just a merely a mental thing; it's a physical manifestation. Aside from the mental subjective side, I have physical manifestation, and I tell exactly what they are. Physically, it feels as if something is like sandpaper is rubbing forward in your whole skin. So your skin feels as if you've been through a massive. It feels intoxicating, almost like an alcohol intoxication. I think it's kind of the best way to describe it. Not that I've never been drunk in my whole life, I've never really consumed alcohol, I've never been a fan of it. But how people describe it is like you feel as if sandpaper is like the worst intoxication hangover is like somebody takes sandpaper and scrub your whole skin, put it over your whole skin and literally rub your whole skin with sandpaper. It's that feeling. It's like it's unsubjective. It's quite, what it feels like when you didn't have a night of sleep. It's like there's nothing in the world that can come close to explaining it. It's a feeling of complete mental and physical dissolution. Um, you know that it's not the way it's supposed to be. Like, everything your body screams, like, I just want to sleep, I just want to get to bed, and physically you just can't get there. But yes, to update you guys, last night was horrible. It was quite bad. I probably only have, equal to like count to around 5 hours, or equated to around 5 hours of sleep for the whole night. So I would say that's the sleep I totaled, around 5 hours, if I'm that lucky, and it was really broken. It's better than what it was at the beginning of this year, but it's still pretty broken. And I don't know, I really envy just going to bed and waking up and feeling refreshed without this song and dance of having to wake up 3 times in the morning, or even 10 times sometimes. And yeah, it's not 10 times anymore, but it used to be, it really used to be 10 to 15 times a night that I used to wake up in the beginning stages, the middle stages of this year. It was absolutely horrific and abhorrent. Um, the other thing that I probably at the tip of the iceberg to me of all the physical manifestations is the muscle fasciculations. If you don't know what it is, it's like ripples on your um the best way to describe it is like, I have a wave of ripples. It appears on your, it's most prevalent on my knee, on my ankles, and on my legs. Like at the back of my leg muscles, there's like ripples. Like in the morning I wake up and I haven't really sleep deprived. There's this twitching. My whole body is twitching, and there's kind of ripples. It's like ripples and waves, and it feels like someone is cutting you. It's like the way to describe it is like someone's cutting you with a knife all along your skin. So it's not just the sandpaper thing that's keeping up, but it's like somebody's cutting you and actually darting a knife through your skin and just cutting through the area. That's kind of how it feels like. It's extremely, it's just extremely irritating. It's irritating and extremely just pesky, but it's also just very painful in a way. It's difficult. It's a difficult emotion to describe. It's like muscle fasciculations, and that's where you know it's not just merely. It's just not merely. It's not merely subjective. It's not merely paradoxical. You know you didn't sleep. You physically didn't sleep. It's physical manifestations of sleep deprivation that I'm talking about here. It's not just a subjective sleep. Um. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm battling for the last year, I guess. 10 months to be more exact. 10 months and 2 days to be exact, because it's the 2nd of October today. So yeah, it's like the beginning of the year. This year was absolutely horrific, and um, I think maybe if I do have a bit more energy, I would potentially go out into exactly how this all happened, and the first week to be more, to have a bit more of a detailed response as a next to this video. I might actually publish another mid video, but I just don't have the energy at this point to go into the nucleus of exactly how this happened. So I'm probably just not going to bore you guys with the details. But when I do have enough energy and I can cusp together my aura into one piece, I potentially could spit out a bit more of the of the history with insomnia and anxiety and exactly how it happened. But it was absolutely horrendous. Um, Look, part of the video is because I promise you guys that I will release for now daily videos on exactly the progress. I do experience pain as well. The fears around my eyes are getting worsened because actually, as I sleep less, it's like my eye strain is worse, and I experience shooting pains around my eyes. This makes it so much worse. So I actually am struggling again with chronic pain. So a kind of benign problem like sleep deprivation turns more malignant because I actually start to experience pain from sleep deprivation, and it makes it worse. So yeah, it makes it much, much worse now. So I'm really, really battling with I just really wish I could just put this thing, essentially just close the lid on this thing, because sleep deprivation and insomnia. I just really want this thing to be over. I just really want to finalize this problem, to learn what I have to learn. And it's like I do study as much as I can. I do the best I can. It's like just, as I am now, I physically can't work a job. Like I physically can't go and actually work a job. I have to be a freelancer. I'm pretty much forced to be it. I just can't go back to a normal way of living like this. It's like the anxiety, the sleep deprivation is making it impossible to actually function as a normal human being. And basic things like now going by the day, I'm constantly just monitoring and thinking, how am I going to be sleeping tonight if I do X, Y, Z? If I did, I used to go to the gym quite religiously when I was pretty younger last year. Just last year I used to go to the gym, yeah, in like 3, 4 times a week sometimes. And this got me a point where I was really, really fit. And I lost it all in the beginning of this year. I mean, 3 months, 4 months, I didn't go to the gym at all, even exercised. I was so extremely just presumptuous or over conscious of my sleep and just getting it right and getting it better. I was extremely just gung ho on just my sleep effort. And it was just all real effort, real conscious effort on my part. And through the latter part of this year, I would say the latter months of this year was picking up again, where I started to lose that fear of losing sleep. But it's still very prevalent now. And I would say I'm still not over it, to be honest. And this is partly why I thought I might just come clean with you guys and just say, this is what I'm going through. I'm really battling this. I really want this over. And it's taking up my life. I need to get this thing sorted out because it's already been a year and I'm still struggling. And um, there really is no help available for people asking me about, why don't you go and see a therapist? Why don't you go see a psychologist? Let me just be very clear. Psychologists aren't all trained in therapy. Therapy, the way that you understand it, and psychology, as you understand, it's quite broad. Say a psychologist, or they're quite interchangeable, like the terms, but it's not the same thing. Like, therapist could be pretty much anyone, but on the one end of the spectrum of therapists could pretty much be anybody calling themselves a helper or counselor. All these are therapists, but at the other end of the spectrum, there are specialists. They sometimes also use the denominator therapists, although this portmanteau doesn't really help them. They are OCD or they are specific anxiety disorder or phobia specialists or behaviorists, but they usually use a different term or a stronger term to kind of fancy their title. Because of course, therapist is a much more broad, holistic term for the profession of helping people, if it is rather discipline, rather profession. But so psychologists are trained in the basics of, say, cognitive therapies, behavioral therapy, but they're not really trained specific to OCD. So the thing is, when you have a specific form of OCD or a coupling of problems, psychologists can help with depression, of course. They know quite a lot about it as a frontline, but psychologists don't know too much about OCD. They can help somewhat, but some of psychology techniques for OCD is actually hurtful and is actually counterproductive. Because because OCD is actually not an anxiety disorder, and I know a lot of people think OCD is a proxy anxiety disorder. It's not. It's a I think the best way to describe it is your brain is essentially misfiring. That's it, and it causes anxiety. So of course there's a comorbidity to anxiety. So OCD does occur with anxiety because of course you already need to be sensitive to anxiety to have OCD in the sense that it causes you distress. But as a standalone condition, OCD is not an anxiety disorder. OCD is a thought-based disorder or a neurodegenerative disorder where the mind, I can't actually quote you exactly which part of the brain, but it's a couple collaborative attempts at the brain trying to signal reality and getting, how most people would think about a thought and the person would let that thought go. Someone with OCD physically can detach from that thought. So I'm not talking about all the thoughts. It's actually a weird thing. It's specific to their fear. So somebody with OCD who value their friendships will start to, at some point in their life, develop OCD around it. You develop OCD around what you value the most. And OCD is very specific. I'm not really sure why it's the case, but it obviously needs anxiety to feel the process. But it's most people would value friendship and they would detach normally from thoughts regarding friends or regarding inappropriate thoughts regarding friends, for instance, or etc. etc. But somebody with OCD would at some point in their life develop the grievous thoughts around anything and everything that they value, which is kind of it's counterintuitive to why it would work to normal people, because most people would just be like, why do you even have these thoughts? You can let them go. But for somebody with OCD, they can't. So it's definitely a thought-based disorder. But it also serves so that the current techniques that's used in psychoanalysis do not work for somebody with OCD. So the Rogerian techniques, the Jungian, the Freudian, those techniques aren't applicable or pragmatic to you, or pertinent to that form or the subtypes of OCD, and even to the lesser subtypes that I have. So yeah, it's like when you're telling somebody to go and get therapy, these therapists are very specialized people, and there's only a few. There's like two in the whole country that I'm living in, and they're overbooked. It's like you have to book months before, and there's only one session. So I'm kind of left with self-help as long as I have. Sometimes I do go on the OCD website and I do comment. I mean, you might actually see my comments there, but the IOCDF, where we're lucky to have them because they're experts trained in OCD and they answer questions, and those people would readily answer your questions. But I would say the IOCDF do have live streams and it's very helpful and it really helped me so far. But it's like I already know most of these things. It's like it's not on if in it's not on unlucid. I already am aware of these remedies that are available. It's not that I'm not. I know of pretty much every other method, or most of the hallmark methods that are used to treat OCD, the cognitive behavioral therapies that are used to treat OCD. I'm pretty much aware of them all, and I'm probably just going to break them down in a future video as well. But yeah, it's not as if it's very easy to say, why don't you go and see a psychologist? Why don't you go and see a therapist about your counselor, about your condition? But these people need to be trained, of course, in your specific condition. And there's not always, there aren't there aren't enough people in actually specializing in OCD or the subtypes of invariable anxiety or refractory conditions. So, of course, you're going to struggle getting these people. Anyways, yeah. Sorry, I just got to lie on my bed. Let me just readjust my headset. So my goal, roughly put with this channel, is definitely going to I want to go into the meat of anxiety, OCD, and the therapies, and actually dissect and debunk a lot of myths, but also dissect the peculiarities of current treatments, because there's quite a lot. Many of these treatments are experimental and theoretical, if not complete, just gobbledygook. We do also have, just as with anything, methods that are kind of they're conducive to the mean, and they're convergent to the mean quite highly. So 80 to 90% of mean convergence they have. Like, for instance, you get therapies like cognitive behavioral, and then you get ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, and the two are kind of mutually exclusive. Like, for instance, they are jamming quite a lot. It's like a marriage made in heaven, but there are clear differences between the two, at least. That one is actually centered in Eastern philosophies, and the other is centered in the Western way of thinking. So it's like a complementary system, but they aren't inductively understood or implicitly understood by means of abduction or by means of addition. Because if you look at, for instance, CBT, which is the classic treatment that uses exposure and response prevention for its main way of collaborating with an anxiety patient, ACT is different, where it actually uses mindfulness as its mainstay of treatment. And those modalities do differ, right? So it's not the same modalities at all. Now you can also get other things like IBT, which is inference-based therapies, metacognitive-based therapy. All these differ in classical definitional differences or propositional logic that differ. So there's variance amongst these, and there can be high variances. And what's actually worse about the variance in acceptable therapies is many of these therapies are actually evidence-based therapies. It's not non-evidence-based. These therapies are somehow, they do have backed up studies. The literature does show evidence for, so they are clearly evidence-based, and they do differ somewhat maximally sometimes amongst the differences that there can be. So that's what makes it very difficult to get the right therapy, because it becomes to a point where it's just even Stevenness, and it's difficult to kind of find the right thing that will work for you. And the mentalism around it is also difficult. For instance, someone might understand a therapy to mean something, or the treatment modality to mean something specifically, and another person might understand something differently about a treatment modality. So, for instance, inference-based therapy has it that you need to look at the inference around your OCD, and that inference is faulty. But it's not always easy to see what the inference is, or getting to the inference. And the difficulty about the inference-based therapies is it's a real, I would say it's a third or fourth wave intervention, and it's not as widely known in the realm of OCD treatment. But there's a lot that I feel that's logically fallible about the IBT model that I'm going to get to in another video. It's not. I don't think the logic behind it is as sound, even though it does sound theoretically it is. But I would say that there are other methods that are like the ones that we know, as I've mentioned before in the former part of this video, ACT and CBT, which there's a lot more backed up research for these, and actually a lot more control studies that have shown these methods much more viable, much more remedial in terms of OCD treatment. So I do think that there's a reason they're still employed, although not completely categorically imperative to somebody saying with sensory motor or hyper awareness OCD. So I think that because I know there are some people on this channel who suffer from these ad hoc OCD forms, and it's going to be a lot harder to find treatment. I don't think there's as much evidence-based treatment for these conditions, so you have to plug and play. You have to experiment. There's just no other way to around it. I personally found that ACT and CBT didn't help me as much. I eventually tried IBT, and it didn't. It was kind of an eye opener. I do think there are some aspects of it that I do enjoy, or that I find logical or viable or placid, but I won't really buy into the whole treatment modality, not least because, I mean, sensing can be also biased, sensing can be corrupted. So, I mean, it's not as if you can completely trust your senses and believe that is the holy grail to experience, because, I mean, of course, your OCD, being quite smart, can corrupt and can jack or hack into your sensing. So, I mean, of course, that's another problem. So I'm probably going to have to go into making a video about it myself, but yes, I would say there's a lot of issues and a lot of work to do in regards to finding the right treatment modality, the right treatment for you. It's difficult to actually find out because everything in OCD takes a long time. It could take up to a year before you actually see real results. So at that point, it could actually just be habituation. I don't really know what it is, but yeah, it's very difficult because OCD can be a lifetime thing. And there are some people like me who have had conditions for 10 years. I mean, I had my hyperawareness, a blinking obsession for a very long time until it actually got down. I mean, 10 years is a long time, right? It's a decade. So it's not as if it can take a long time before you, but of course you need the right treatment as well. I think I said